And welcome once again to another episode of the Horizon Roundtable. Another episode. Man, we're getting close to the end, but man, things keep coming up. I'm Bob McDonald. I can be reached on Twitter at Bob McDonald, and you can find me at campuspressbox.com. With me, as always, with a lot to say, I wouldn't doubt, Jimmy Lemke.
Yeah, a lot to say would be understatement of the universe at this juncture. If you're a fan of me just going off on people, this is an episode for you.
Yes, we got a couple of people to deal with on that one. Jimmy's at PantherU on Twitter and PantherU.com. So lots to get to. And we are at...
You'll be able to find me at PantherU on Twitter. One person who won't be able to find me at PantherU on Twitter would be Bob Grant, athletic director at Wright State, who blocked me as well as a lot of other people in the last couple days on Twitter.
Yeah, and I'm sure at the end of this episode, he'll be blocking me too. What is it? Who is this guy? Get him out of here. Yeah, but did we ever determine if he had blocked Dan Dakic and Paul Biancardi yet?
I don't know, but he has blocked Terry Bogan at Pat.
Now,
yeah,
I'm kind of mad about that one because we're talking Terry Bogan, who's you can find him on Twitter at RoadTrip45. His handle on the message boards for decades, for a couple of decades now, has been Road Trip. The guy is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet, and he got blocked.
Yeah.
What the hell is that all about?
It's Bob Grant. Bob Grant is, I mean, was it Dakic or Biancardi? Somebody had brought out the quote, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Obviously, Billy Donlin, he of winning 20-plus games in almost every year he's been coach of the Wright State. Been to the conference title game 3 of the last 4 years, is it? 3 of the last
Something
4
like
years?
that, yeah.
I want to say 13, 14, and 16 at the Horizon League Championship game. This is not a guy who you would fire. And he's young. It is his 6th year, but he has been building. He had a little bit above average record, but also the 2014-15 season, he had just a ton of injuries that he had to deal with.
Yep.
So it's a little confusing why it would happen. From what all the national people are saying, as far as we've mentioned Dakic and Biancardi, sounds like this was personal. And I'm sorry, but when you make things personal, then you're screwing over a whole lot of people. And Bob Grant, fires Billy Donlin, which you have to replace him with somebody who's going to be winning 24-plus games every single year, because Billy Donlin was a guy who was winning between 19 and 22 or 23 wins in most years. So how do you have some room to get better, certainly, and Billy Donlin might have been the guy to do, but you also have a lot of room to go the other way.
Yep.
And there was a reason that Biancardi ended up getting jettisoned out of there, was because Wright State was so much of an easy. They weren't so much of a hard out in the Horizon League when I got in here in 2005. So
Biancardi had some other issues related to his actually had some sanctioning issues related to his time beforehand as a assistant coach at Ohio State too. So keep that in mind too.
John O'Brien's staff at Ohio State.
Yeah. Oh yes, he was on that staff that had to vacate their I think it was one of their tournament runs, and he got busted at that right along with that. That's exactly what happened.
Either way, they went to Brad Brownell, who took them to their only NCAA tournament in Division I.
Which is interesting because Brad Brownell himself was ousted at Wilmington by an AD who obviously had no idea what he was doing. The irony of picking up a guy like Brad Brownell based upon something the thought process of an AD, and then losing Billy Donlin in the same basic fashion, really, at the same school. Even that's kind of odd to me, at least. Makes you wonder what's going on over there. Also, you can pretty much tell today is the overriding theme of this particular episode of the podcast is going to be, not just the Wright State thing, but Jimmy, we talked about this last episode, and I really thought we were going to have another year to discuss this, but Milwaukee, Rob Jeter, he's gone.
You can say your guy because Rob Jeter is my guy.
I know. I'm trying to be impartial. Damn it!
I am a Rob Jeter guy through, and there's nothing that. There's some background that needs to be put out there. Rob Jeter came in following Bruce Pearl, who is a very difficult act to follow. Not as much the success, although Bruce Pearl did take us to the Sweet 16 and all the heights of that. It's not that as much as it was the personality. Bruce Pearl was very much he had this wonderful used car salesman, just kind of outgoing personality. Everybody loved Bruce Pearl. So
yep.
Whoever was going to follow Bruce Pearl was going to have a difficult job. And Rob took that job, and Rob had only been an assistant before, and he was a great recruiter, but he had only been an assistant. He hadn't been a head coach himself. So he hadn't been able to direct a program. And after his first year, when all of the last of the Bo Ryan and Bruce Pearl recruits had filed out as seniors and went after their second round appearance in 2006, Rob was basically had to start with a bare cupboard. There were a couple that were on the 06-07 team that had some impact on the 05-06 team. Avery Smith was chief among them, but really, Rob was starting from scratch. And the 06-07 season was really about starting with, he just didn't have talent. And then 07-08, he learned some other problems. Yeah, he learned other things about being a head coach and running a program. He had taken a flyer on a kid named Torrey Johnson, who's from Milwaukee, went to Juneau High School that has since closed. He played at Oklahoma State and then got run out of there when he had gotten a DUI. And Rob had decided to take a flyer on him, that he was a good kid that just made some mistakes. Brought him in. Late in the fall semester, Torrey had been at a house party, got drunk, punched his girlfriend or hit his girlfriend. I can't remember if he slapped her or what. He did something with his girlfriend, and then basically being drunk and stupid, ran and hid in a closet somewhere, and the cops found him. Rob kicked him off the team the next morning. Another couple players from that team, Tim Flowers and Kevin Johnson, were two guys from Derrick Rose's entourage that played with him at Simeon, Chicago Simeon, and they basically thought that when you're part of Derrick Rose's entourage, it doesn't matter where you go, you get the star treatment. They didn't go to class or anything like that. So those guys, Rob learned some valuable lessons with those guys, and then he had a pile of injuries. They finished like 14-16 that year, but it was really because they had injuries and a lot of like character issues. And Rob learned from that experience the kind of character player he wanted to bring into his program. And since then, I can probably count on one hand the amount of players that have been difficult for us and there was really only one player who I would define as a clubhouse cancer since that season. And if you look at Rob Jeter's year-to-year record, you saw that the team would get better and better. They went from 9 to 14 to 17 wins, and then in almost every year after that, they were at 19, 20, or 21 wins, apart from 2012-13 when the team was in the Klotchie Center when Andy Geiger, who had been Ohio State AD, made the absolute joke of a decision to bring the team back to the Klotchie Center. The team was totally demoralized, and they that was the 8-24 season. And then in 14 and 15, when they had nothing to play for because of the APR ban. So apart from those two seasons, Rob has been like a 19 and 13 or 20 and 19 and 14, 20 and 13. That has been like Rob's record since like 08-09. And one thing that you should also know from 08-09 was that was the last season where Bud Haady was the athletic director of the university. The AD spot was held by Bud Haady since 1988. And he had made the decision to move the team to Division I, and he was the guy that did that for the 90-91 season, was our first year in Division I. Back in Division I. And Bud Haady made that decision because this is a very large school. We have a Big Ten size enrollment. There is a void. The city was big enough to support a couple teams, and the mid 2000s proved that. And so it was Bud's decision, and Bud was our AD for 20 years after he had been the ticket office manager at the University of Miami in Ohio. Now, Bud retired in 2009 and was replaced by a former Green Bay Packer by the name of George Kunz. George Kunz was, and I have very intimate knowledge of the Kunz hire and Kunz's tenure because I was on the search and screen committee that that recommended the hiring of George Kunz to then Chancellor Carlos Santiago. And I also was the sports editor of the UWM Post, so I was in that office talking to everybody like almost every day. Now, George Kunz was in way over his head, and he was an associate athletic director at Marquette. He was really there. He was working on his doctorate at the time, but he was really there for. We really thought that what Kunz could do was come in and open doors to us in the state of Wisconsin that we never would have been able to get in before, simply because this guy was one of the captains of the defense along with Reggie White on our 96 Super Bowl team. And in the state of Wisconsin, the Packers are a religion. I'm not kidding you. At Catholic Mass lets out 15 minutes early during the Packer season so nobody misses kickoff. This is so obviously this is a guy that we looked at as he could open a lot of doors because he's George Kunz, Green Bay Packer, and he could also he could fundraise and get build us something and then move up. We had expected that when we recommended him that he would get hired, become raise a bunch of money and build us an arena. The arena was what we really wanted at the time. Since then I have about a year after that or 2 years after that, I had honed that into we don't need a basketball arena as much as we need a practice facility for the basketball team, which we've talked about before. But George Kunz, when we recommended him to Carlos Santiago, we recommended him over a few people. Vince Sweeney was associate AD at Madison. He was my first choice, but I was talked out of it by somebody. I was talked into Kunz by somebody else who was on the search and screen committee. It was over him, over Vince Sweeney, over Monty Porter, who was an associate or assistant AD at Western Michigan, who didn't really impress much of anybody. And then associate AD at Stony Brook was Paul Schlickman, who ended up not long after becoming the AD at Central Connecticut State. And so we recommended to Santiago that he hire George Kuntz, but we also recommended, because we knew that Kuntz was very much more of like a figurehead. Coming into this, the idea was that we could get by bringing in Kuntz, we could open those doors, but we needed somebody who could replace Bud Hady's administrative ability. Bud Hady in the last 2 years of his job ran the budget and did the finance for the athletic department, which you really don't want your AD doing that. You want to have an associate AD of finance doing the job, or a deputy AD or somebody. And in 2007, Chuck Lang, the finance associate AD, had left us for San Diego State. So we recommended to Santiago, you should hire George Kuntz, but you should also hire a strong associate AD who can run the books and be the main administrator, so that George Kuntz can really just be a figurehead that goes around and raises money by talking to people. Now, the problem...
So bottom line, clearly that didn't happen.
Yes, that didn't happen for about, Kuntz started, and it wasn't until I want to say March or April of the following year when that Charlie Gross had been brought in to start. And by the time Charlie Gross had started, George Kuntz had totally screwed up everything. Now,
nice.
He didn't screw it up on purpose. He had some personal issues. His wife, Tunisia, had died of breast cancer in, I believe it was October of that year. So George just didn't have a very good year. In fact, it was probably the worst year of the guy's life, and I feel for him because he was a very nice guy. But George Kuntz also wanted to get his own basketball coach. And one thing that everybody should know is that every athletic director wants their own guy running the number one program at the school. So the next AD at Ohio State wouldn't be sad about Urban Meyer going to the NFL, because they'd get to bring in their own football coach. The next AD at Marquette wouldn't be sad if Steve Wojciechowski left because to the Duke job, because then they could bring in their own guy. ADs always want that. So
the problem with Milwaukee, though, is that there's been kind of a little bit of a churn over there in the AD department. Picking, and Rob Jeter is kind of, rolled with the punches through all of them up until this very point in time with Amanda Braun.
Right. Well, I don't want to get to that, because that right now It's a little bit of a story. I am about halfway through it, or a little past halfway through it. So it's not. You have to get the background to understand why the basketball program has been on the precipice of being a good team, but hasn't been able to get quite there. Now, George Kuntz and every athletic director since has wanted their own guy as head coach, apart from Andy Geiger, but Andy Geiger screwed us up in his own special way. George Kuntz, his way of sabotaging the basketball program, at least his eventual way, was that his plan, and this is what ended up giving him the ouster, is that he wanted to hire a coach so badly. And the coach that he wanted to hire, by the way, is named Tony Benford. He was an assistant at Marquette. He is now, I believe, he's still the head coach at North Texas. So how is the Mean Green doing in basketball is all I got to say. But George Kuntz was going to fire every single one of Rob Jeter's assistants, all three actual assistants, as well as the director of basketball ops and the video coordinator. So he was going to fire all 5 of those guys and allow Jeter to only hire back one person, and the rest of the staff would be left empty. If you're not familiar with how staffs are built, JUCOs and 2-year community colleges usually have at least 2 assistants. So for a Division I program to have 1 assistant, the basketball coach is obviously having a real problem. So the idea that Kuntz had, because Rob Jeter's contract had been, so bad for the department, was that he would put Rob in an impossible situation, and that Rob would quit. The problem with that is that Rob Jeter is, if you know nothing about Rob Jeter's personal relationships with people except one thing, know that Rob Jeter is basically a son to Bo Ryan. Bo coached Rob at Platteville, and Rob had been with him all the way until he took our job in 2005. So we're talking about 18 years where Rob was at this guy's side, almost about 16 of 18 years. 1 year he played pro overseas. 1 year he was on Marquette's staff under Mike Dean. But so the idea is that if Kuntz had done this and gotten Rob to quit, our university would have been blackballed by the National Association of Basketball Coaches. Bo Ryan is pretty close, had become pretty close with Tom Izzo. And these are two of the most loved guys in college basketball. And if Tom Izzo and Bo Ryan are walking around telling coaches, you better not take that UWM job, that would have just killed our program. Kuntz might have gotten Tony Benford, but Kuntz would have just totally wrecked our entire program for the long term. So what ended up happening is, excuse me one second. Donors went to Carlos Santiago and told him, if you do this, or if you let Kuntz do this, we're all going to pull our money, but you're also going to screw over the entire program. Ended up, Kuntz got pushed out. After him, there was an interim you really can't do anything. His name was Dave Gilbert. He runs the UWM Foundation, the fundraising arm. Very nice guy, knows basketball, knows athletics, but as an interim, you can't really command the support and command the respect from the university, because you're only going to be there for on an interim basis. So after Rick Costello was hired, that guy spent probably 90% of his time figuring out what other sport Milwaukee could add so that men's basketball wasn't, doing the brunt of everything. If you don't know much about the college basketball world, when you're a mid-major, the absolute best thing that you can have going for you is to not have a football program. Because a football program can be an albatross on an athletic department, especially a basketball team. There are schools that succeed despite this. San Diego State, North Dakota, Northern Iowa. These are schools with successful football programs that succeed in basketball as well. It's very difficult to do, and you have to have an extremely large budget to make it happen. So the problem with that is, that Costello was totally not paying attention to the basketball team. He ended up screwing up with soccer on something really stupid, and he ended up leaving. So when he was done, when he was forced to resign, Mike Lovell was our chancellor. Carlos Santiago had taken over the Hispanic College Fund. And Mike Lovell, who was the dean of the engineering school, stepped in on an interim basis to run, the university. So this is a guy who had spent his entire career in academia and had only just become an interim chancellor just a couple months before. So in the beginning of 2011, he's kind of like, I don't know what I'm doing. I need help here. So he goes to the only person that he knows will help him in hiring an athletic director, and that would be John LeCrone. Now,
yeah, that guy.
So John LeCrone, in quote-unquote helping the university, decides to convince us to bring his old buddy from the ACC, when LeCrone was on staff at the ACC and Andy Geiger was AD at Maryland, bring over my old buddy Andy Geiger. he'll make sure that the athletic department, gets up and going, and then gets you a permanent replacement. So, Andy Geiger makes the decision to move back to the Kalachi Center, and many people said he made this decision without ever actually even stepping into the arena in the Kalachi Center. I don't know
Which
if
I
that's
think
100%.
I think you've mentioned that on a couple of occasions. Yeah, that's still a head scratcher, man.
There's another part that I can't really talk about. That Andy Geiger screwed up royally, but that would definitely be the one. UWM lost over half of its season ticket holder base for the 2012-13 season. So these kids were going in front of, they were playing in front of 35 to 4,500 people for the low games and over 5,000 for the bigger games leading up to 2011-12. And then after Geiger came in, they were starting to play in front of really about 1,000 to maybe 2,000 at the Kalachi Center on campus. Which is, if you've never been to the Kalachi Center, picture your high school gym, and that's what the Kalachi Center is. The Kalachi Center is basically just a little bit bigger version of a high school gym. It was built in the 70s as an intramural facility. It was not built for intercollegiate athletics. I believe we went over this on the episode we had Carrick on, when we were talking about the history of the arena.
Yes.
And Callahan.
Yes, we were. And by the way, not to make you feel bad, but my high school gym was probably bigger than the Klatchke Center.
Yeah, the Klatchke Center was not fit for a Division I program, but Andy Geiger, in his infinite wisdom, said that we are a bleacher school, a school of, at the time, 29,000 students, is a pull-out bleacher school. He straight up said that on, I believe it was 12.
You're an athletic director, by the way, at the time. That's pretty impressive that you would kind of set that low a bar and you're the athletic director.
Yeah, Andy Geiger's plan. He spent $750,000 out of this athletics arena fee, which has since been renamed the athletics facilities fee, to make it so that it could be spent on the basketball practice facility specifically. Andy Geiger's plan included spending about $750,000, bringing the Klatchke Center not just up to code, but to give it a fresh coat of paint. They added like a wall version of the Hall of Fame, which is very small, and it has a flat screen TV that has never been on. If I remember correctly, it was just a really, really stupid way to spend money. They got new banners for all the teams and the championship. I mean, it was just the Klatchke Center year was just so awful in so many ways. After the decision was made to go to the Klatchke Center, Cody Wickman was the only recruit that committed to our program. Cody Wickman, as I love Cody Wickman, I'm going to be really happy to see him play 25 minutes a game next year. But when he was a high school player, we were his only full scholarship offer, if I remember correctly. Green Bay had offered him, and he's from the Green Bay area. Green Bay had offered him a preferred walk-on spot, where you pay for your own way in most years. So obviously, our recruiting fell off considerably, and it wasn't until after Amanda Braun had come in that until the late 2013 year, when UWM started pulling in the recruits that the arena was affording us. Jordan Nairn, when he committed to play for UWM, had picked us over Creighton. He picked us over Maryland, and I'm trying to remember the third other school was. It was like an A10 school, but Jordan Aaron had picked us because of what we the arena and how the team traveled. He had been told how the university the basketball team, when they go on road trips, if it's not a short bus trip, like if it's not a Butler, Valpo, Green Bay, or UIC game, if it's not that close, we take a chartered flight and they stay at a really nice hotel. it's a way for the athletic department and the basketball program to mitigate the fact that our practice situation is probably the worst in Division One, if not one of the 5 or 6 worst in Division One. So Jordan Aaron and other recruits that had committed for that 2012-13 year showed up thinking that they were going to be playing in the house that Kareem and Oscar Robertson built or made famous, and rather instead they were playing inside this just high school gym, which was as big as the one he played in high school in the Bronx. So Amanda Braun had stepped in after a while, and like every athletic director before her, she was sabotaging the basketball program. The red shirts and transfers, one of the first things she did, they were not able to go on road trips. So there was a time we played in the 2013-14 season, her first year. We played at UMKC, and the Pearl Twins are red shirts that year. And I was at the Sports Authority where my good friend Paul Spicuzza was working, and the game's going on because we're listening to the game on the radio. It wasn't on, or we had the game on the TV in the store. And in come the Pearl Twins, and we're like, "What's going on? Why aren't you guys in Kansas City?" And they're like, "Well, we're not allowed to go on road trips." And I was like, "Why would Jeter not let you go on road trips?" He's like, and one of them, obviously I can't remember which because they're identical. One of them says, "Oh no, it's the athletic director won't let redshirts and transfers go." In fact, Trinson White was sitting, in Milwaukee too. He just wasn't with them. So when we did the math, and those players lost up to something like 40% of their practices during their freshman season. So how are you supposed to get better as a player if you are not allowed to get on the court and play with, practice with your team during, the season? So this was one of a lot of different moves where Amanda Braun made these decisions that cost the basketball team a little bit here, a little bit there, a little bit here, a little bit there. Eventually, they were busing to most places. In fact, when the Horizon League tournament came up, I believe we were after Youngstown State, I think we were the only school that actually that didn't fly to Detroit for the Horizon League tournament. I think Cleveland State probably took a bus just because you guys are only like 3 hours away.
Yeah, it's only 3 hours away. That's a short trip for us.
Remember why I said Jordan Aaron committed here to play for Milwaukee? He liked the arena. He liked number one in the coaching staff, but number two, he liked the arena, which Geiger had screwed up, fixed, and he also liked the travel. He liked the idea of staying in really nice hotels and eating nice food and doing these things. It's a way for us to mitigate the lack of a practice facility or even a practice gym. Well, we could no longer these things. So recruiting has kind of fallen off because it's easy for other schools to say, well, you're not even traveling in style like they used to, and your practice, you're going to get kicked out of practice by the dodgeball team. Because at the Kalachi Center, the arena floor is where the basketball team practices, and they are kicked off floor by whatever intramural program is supposed to follow them. And I've been to I've been to a couple hundred practices in my day since I came to UWM. And there would be days where they would have a 2-hour practice, and with half an hour or 45 minutes to go, you'd have some facilities guy who works for the university coming in and saying, you guys got to clear the floor now because the intramural whatever teams games are supposed to start and we have to set up. Does this sound like a tenable situation to you?
No, it doesn't. And well, this is the other question, and this goes back to what we talked about last episode in the question that I had posed. of the do you trust your current AD to make the right decision as it relates? Okay, yeah, because you are of the opinion that
that sentence, do you trust your current AD? And I will say no.
okay. Well, you were of the opinion that you wanted the chancellor, Mark Moan, to actually make the decision, but it does not sound like it is his decision that's going to be made. It's going to be Amanda Braun's decision, and so therefore now you have that problem. And with the other situation, then is you now have two, not just Milwaukee, of course. You have two vacancies within the Horizon League right now.
Yeah.
You have Milwaukee, you have Wright State. You have two situations where, regardless of the, you have two coaches that won 20 games this year, and it wasn't enough. And so if you are applying to these positions, you have to have in the back of your head, the other guy won 20 games last season, and it wasn't enough. So there must be something else going on, be it personality-wise, be it something-wise, that's going to make me think twice about wanting to, apply for this particular position. And that may be, realistically, a deterrent for potentially some of the top-tier choices that these ADs have to fill this position. And then you run into a situation where your first choice isn't going to be the person who gets the job. And I know I mentioned this a couple nights ago on Twitter, where this is the Horizon League. You have just as much a chance to get a Link Darner as your head coach as you do a Mike Garland.
Right.
And that's the situation that these schools have set themselves up for. Whether they did it intentionally or not remains to be seen.
Well, I will say this. Obviously, I can't speak to Wright State's opening. As far as ours, the coaches who have approached me, or the representatives of coaches who have approached me in the last week, or in the last, 4 days, to kind of see, kind of get their feeling of the landscape on campus, before they formally apply for the basketball coaching job. I think Amanda's going to have a pretty solid base to choose from anyways. So I actually think the chances of Amanda Braun finding a good coach are pretty high.
Okay.
I think that her hire in women's soccer was maybe a good hire. It wasn't the right hire because she passed on the assistant from Northwestern, who was an alum and built our program into craziness. But obviously, we don't need to talk about women's soccer. When men's basketball, I know at least three. I was see. Hold on, let me get my list. I've spoken to 16 assistants at Division I schools and a couple outside of Division I. Of those 16, 4 of them. No. Two of them are high majors that are going to be part of the job. There are a couple people who have approached me as representatives of other coaches who would be applying for the job, and just getting a lay of the landscape. I haven't. I have laid out, pretty much everything that's out there, that's out in public. Talk to them. I do have a preference as to who I want to be the next basketball coach at this school. I will not share that. I've said on the message board and on Twitter that I do not want to influence Amanda Braun in any way, shape, or form to go one way or the other on the next basketball coach. And my preference has representatives for that person have spoken to me. But as I said to them, and as I said to them, and I'm saying to you, I'm not, going to publicly support this person.
Sure.
I think everything Amanda Braun has done in the last couple weeks, the best word to describe all of it is petty. The way she has handled the Jeter firing, the way she handled the
At the same time, you could say the same thing about the Donlin firing too, because you're talking about a guy who everybody knew he got fired, and then Wright State finally got around to sending out and announcing it 3 days later. And then the AD is turning around and blocking people on Twitter, which is just the most ridiculous thing on the planet, by the way. I mean, okay.
I don't think that these athletic directors are trying to sabotage things for real. I think what they just really want is to hire their own basketball coaches. Donlin, to be sure, Donlin was hired by Bob Grant. But Donlin was also the assistant of a team that was bringing back a bunch of good players that Brad Brownell had left behind, and he was a very popular, successful coach. So I don't know I think Bob Grant's hands might have been tied by some donors to hire Donlin in the first place. But everything I know is the same as what everybody knows in public. I don't know why he did it. All we know is that Dakich and Biancardi are telling everybody that it was personal. I'm sure Biancardi is tight with a bunch of donors at that school, so I'm sure that he is a much more reputable source than most. All I know is what's public, and what it sounds like it was petty. And Amanda Braun's decisions, they reek of petty, whether or not she actually did it. I know what else is coming in the next couple weeks. I know some of it. I don't know all of it. I know that if Amanda Braun wants to hire an athletic director, wants to hire the next basketball coach, she may want to expedite that process, because I'm not sure that once this next Gary D'Amato article comes out, Gary D'Amato is the secondary beat writer for our basketball team. When I say secondary, really the end of season beat writer. Todd Rosiak is our primary beat writer. He goes to Arizona for spring training because he's the number 2 Brewers guy. Gary D'Amato covers us at the end of the season. And one of the things with Gary D'Amato is that he has said on 105.7 FM that his story in the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel from Thursday evening that was published on Friday was really just an opening salvo because the firing happened, that he's been working on a much bigger story that will be coming out. I do know some of the things that will be in that story. I don't know all of them. I do know that Amanda Braun's status as athletic director, if it's not in doubt right now, it should be in doubt after this next piece comes out. I only know a few.
Here's the other question that beyond that, and it sounds like that is really not a great situation regardless, and I'm sure we'll be talking about that later, in future episodes. But from a conference standpoint, when you look at both of the situations that have transpired, and add that to the fact that you have a Valparaiso team that did not get into the NCAA tournament, and now is playing pissed off in the NIT, and we'll talk about that a little bit more in depth next episode, because next week, because they're still playing and they're still playing angry. But you take that situation. You take the situation where you're already having a problem with the strength of the conference, and then you turn around, and then you have two of your arguably, or not arguably, even top coaches being dismissed, and they're going to be replaced, and that would create, whether it does or not, it creates a real question mark for those two teams next year.
Yeah.
What from a conference standpoint, where is the cause for concern from a conference level?
Well, I think
that is an excellent question.
I think what's going on here is that we have somewhat of a Butler effect, and that Butler effect being that a lot of these programs felt left behind. Donors, fans, season ticket holders, players, coaches, administrators, chancellors and presidents. All these people have felt kind of left behind, and the pressure to succeed is much higher because nobody wants to be left behind in a next round, or maybe because Butler's gone, there's this void that we see needs to be filled at the top of the conference, and everybody wants to be that team, and everybody all of a sudden has shorter leashes on their coaching staffs. But these athletic directors have failed the conference in such a huge way, because let's be 100% clear here. That Horizon League tournament was supported by every athletic director outside of UIC and Valparaiso. That
interesting. The way I want to mention that before we get any further, I don't remember if I mentioned this before, but Gary Waters on his weekly radio show had mentioned only Valparaiso had voted against it. He didn't say anything about UIC.
UIC voted against it, so I can tell you that Gary probably just misspoke. It's not.
Probably. Obviously, they approved it. So, but regardless, go on.
My point is that had we stuck with the previous format, Valpo would have been playing that semifinal against Green Bay on Saturday night in Valparaiso, Indiana. That was an overtime game. It stands to reason that had that been a home game for Valpo, they would have won, or at least, obviously, they would have had a much higher chance of winning. Then they would have gone into the championship game hosting, having a much higher chance of winning. And the reason I bring this up is that Green Bay just got smoked in the NCAA tournament by Texas A&M. And
yes, we finally got around to sorry Green Bay fans, we did finally get around to talking about it.
My point is that Green Bay won a tournament that was really, the Valpo players did not get to sleep in their own beds. And they did have the 8 days off, which may have actually hurt them. I mean, it's an easy argument to make considering it also happened to Oakland. But they weren't in their own beds, and they weren't, they felt like everything was against them. So they lost. And had Valpo been the Horizon League's representative in the NCAA tournament, Valparaiso would have been what? They would have been a higher seed.
Yes, they would have.
They would have been a better team. Look at how they have waxed their first two opponents in the NIT.
Including Florida State.
Yeah, Florida State, which was a middling ACC team.
And they made them look like they were nothing.
Pedestrian. They made them look like they were Northern Kentucky, which, no offense, Northern Kentucky, but you were a pretty bad basketball team this year, despite all of the hoopla and everything. So this is my point. The previous format existed to get the best possible team in the NCAA tournament to win games. And when the team that's seeded fourth wins, usually that team's going to be a low seed. Green Bay ended up being a 14 seed when everybody thought they were going to be a 15, not because Green Bay was worthy of the 14, or well, they were worthy of 14. Not because Green Bay was so much better, but because so many low major 1 seeds were losing in their conference tournaments that they buoyed Green Bay up to the 14 line, in fact, almost to the 13 line. So what I'm saying is that the Horizon League athletic directors screwed the conference there, number one. Number two, the Horizon League athletic directors screwed the conference by supporting and pushing for that Northern Kentucky addition to the conference over Youngstown, or over cutting Youngstown State. And we will save, and I will not say another word because everybody listening to this podcast already knows what I'm going to say. But the point is this. Valparaiso had 8, count them, 8 RPI anchor games in conference alone. 8. Because of a 10, when 4 of the 10 teams are that piss poor awful, you're going to drop your RPI considerably. And thank God Velpo had gotten Green Bay, or instead of somebody, instead of the teams that we in Green Bay had beaten on Saturday, or on Saturday, because Valpo's RPI would have gone down even further if it was Cleveland State or Northern Kentucky. What's going on here is that the Horizon League has made itself too big, and it has screwed over its men's basketball. So the athletic directors who feel pressure to win want to be in the NCAA tournament, but they have all but assured that there will only be one Horizon League team in the NCAA tournament for forever. So they have in essence screwed themselves, and that's why we are stuck where we are. That is why these teams are ranked where they are. And for Billy Donlin, I'm sorry if you're a Wright State fan listening and you supported the firing of Billy Donlin, but that is the dumbest move I've ever seen in my life. This guy can flat out coach. The reason you won 11 games last year is because Billy Donlin was starting the water boy halfway through the season. The reason that your team didn't have a great RPI this season was because half of the team was injured. We talk about how Valpo had a couple injuries, and that's why they lost the Ball State game, because one of the Walkers didn't. I think it was Tavon Walker didn't play, and David Scara only played 3 minutes. Look at Wright State. In their non-conference season, Wright State barely fielded a team. By the time they started the conference season with a game here in Milwaukee, they were starting their 11th guy of the season, where everybody else was starting at most their 7th or 8th. Wright State was decimated by injuries in the non-conference season, so they were losing several games that they should have won. I'm not saying they should have beaten Xavier or George Mason, or is it Cincinnati that also smoked it? They got smoked by Wright State got smoked by the 3 or 4 teams. I'm not saying they would have beat those teams. They would have been closer, but they would have won a bunch of those games that they only lost by 5 points or less. They lost a bunch of games by 5 or 6 points or less. They would have won a lot of those games, and their RPI wouldn't have suffered as much. And this all comes back to the fact that Billy Donlin can coach, and he was damn close to having a really good team, and sure. One way for being in the NCAA tournament. And if Bob Grant thinks that guy should be fired from his job, get the net, Bob Grant. You can go ahead and block my podcast. Just don't listen to it and click unsubscribe. This is the problem with you, is that this I believe 100% for that of Dakich and Biancardi saying that this was personal. Because if this was a basketball decision, you have not the slightest idea what you are doing as an athletic director in terms of men's basketball. People were getting tired because they hadn't been in the NCAA tournament under Billy Donlin. But Wright State, I'm sorry, you've only been to the NCAA tournament once in your entire Division I history.
Mm-hmm.
And I think did they go in 92? Or I think they might have gone in 92.
No, they've only been to one. They've only been to one. I erroneously thought that at one point in time myself, but no, they have only been to one NCAA tournament.
And you're gonna fire them. I mean, it's not a knock. I'm not knocking Wright State. I'm just saying you guys are not the program that
you're doing whatever, and you're not alone. Everybody, I can't. It seems to me that you are not alone. It seems to me that a lot of Wright State fans agree with you, openly wondering why this is happening now. I mean, if it was going to happen, it should have happened last year. When they had a losing record.
A second, I was right. It wasn't 92. It was 93. NCAA.
Okay, fine.
173. I knew they had been from a long time ago.
I thought they had only been. Honestly, I thought they only. Regardless. Anyway, you're. But again, if you're gonna get rid of the guy, you should have gotten rid of the guy last year when they had a down year, not this year when they won 20 games and they were in the championship game. That is, I mean, you know what? I don't know. I don't know. All I know is that now you have you bring out a question mark for two teams that were 20 game winners this year. Now next year you have a question mark how good they're going to be next year. On top of the group of schools that you currently had, the 4 teams that you had this year that were not good. Now, keep in mind, I suspect that at least 1 or 2 of those teams are going to do better next year. We know which one probably won't, but regardless, even if you like, for example, even if Northern Kentucky does better and Cleveland State gets out of there, then you turn around and you have Wright State and Milwaukee who's starting with new coaches, and there's a chance that those 2 teams could go south. And we haven't even talked about Detroit. We don't know what's going on with them. We don't know what's going on with you have Green Bay. You don't know how they're going to do with Link Darner's his recruits, because you have Love, you have Faust, who are going to be graduating. You have those question marks. And so you have so many questions coming in, and you have a conference that is more interested in legacy building than actually doing better on the court. And that is a problem. That is a major problem. And then we get to all act shocked and surprised when the Valparaiso decides one day to move on to another conference. We get to all act all shocked and surprised that that's going to happen. So you're setting it up that way. You're going to set it up. At this point in time, you have set it up where, and we talked about this in previous episodes, where the Horizon League has become Summit League 2.0. Or I'm sorry, we'll call it Mid-Con 2.0, because I don't want to, because Summit League is their own different thing. But you set it up where you've already set it up that way where it's going to be the case. And now, this year, you have it where the Horizon League was in fact Summit League 2.0, because based on the RPI, they were worse than the Summit League. And now you've said it, and then next year you have so much uncertainty that you don't even guarantee that you're going to have a better situation next year. And it's a concern. It should be a concern for each and every fan of this league. Beyond that, I don't know what to tell you, man.
Top team in the RPI, Valparaiso at 49. 4 teams in the 100 to 200 range: Green Bay 112, Milwaukee 173. Between them, Oakland was also close, and then Wright State. Detroit was 204, and then in the last 25 of the top of the 200s, Youngstown at 275, followed by Cleveland State, and then 296 Northern Kentucky. UIC pulled up the rear at 346.
Out of how many teams? 351, 353. I can't remember how many are in Division 1 now.
Teams, I believe, were in the RPI. This conference,
and that brings up another question. Steve McLean year 2. Yeah, you have all these new freshmen. Are they going to do better next year than they did this year? Again, so many different questions, and we'll probably talk about this a lot more in near the close in our closing episode. But I just wanted to get that one off of my chest, and I think. Honestly, I think we'll be talking about this again probably next episode. So,
it's unfortunate because the Horizon League should be really good. What the Horizon League should be is a conference that everybody should want to be a part of. You get these Midwesterners all very close. That your farthest no more you're 8 hours or less from just about everybody. Green Bay aside, you're close enough, and they're all in nice cities. Green Bay and Valparaiso and Youngstown notwithstanding, you're in Detroit, you're in Dayton, you're in Milwaukee, you're in Chicago, you're in Cincinnati.
Yeah. So
you're in these nice cities. We all have these cities that we get a lot of our students from, which means we get a lot of our alumni there. Valparaiso's got
something, yeah.
So these 10 schools, there's good things that this conference should be, and we have this.
Yet here we are,
and we have this one thorn in our side, and it's really digging in, and things are not the greatest right now. So I'm at this point where I hate it because I like playing these games, but I'm a fan of any one of these teams supposed to say this is the best we can do. Youngstown State probably be happy going to a different conference, so they should go.
All right. Well, all right. We'll
such a difficult.
Not to cut you off, but I'm kind of gonna. We'll talk about this a lot more later on, but we're gonna go ahead and wrap this up next week. Because next week we'll probably talk more about Valpo's NIT run, and then this crazy thing that's going out with Vegas and Oakland. We didn't even get to that, but I figured we were going to get to that next week. So, For Life's done it.
Show at some point. We know you listen, Coach. So yes. Maybe on the wrap-up show after the Vegas 16, maybe we'll get,
among other things. So, all right. Well,
that's a hope.
All right. So, yeah, I figured it would be. So, all right. So let's get a wrap it up for us. If you catch us on fourlights.fm and everywhere good podcasts are found, we'll catch you next week.
Thanks, everybody.